Hi, my name is Roy Menken. This is my wife, Jan. I'm thankful to be a peer mentor here at University of Michigan. I have a disease called alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency. I was diagnosed back in 2014. I was on the transplant list for about 27 months. My journey to become a peer mentor started with a simple little Facebook message on a Facebook transplant group. Got a message from Carol who said that we have a fantastic and wonderful support group program here at U of M. I'd posted on Facebook that I was kind of frustrated that I wasn't hearing any more information from my doctors. Carol messaged me saying that we have a wonderful support group meeting here at U of M. We came to it and started talking with Carol and started talking with the different people that were there, both waiting for transplants and people that had already been transplanted. It was such a wealth of information that we decided that we eventually would become peer mentors if I was to ever get my transplant. Once I got listed, they were just fantastic on giving us advice on things that we needed to do, things that we should look out for, and to become our own advocates talking with our doctors. That was one of the biggest things that we got from them, along with just simple little things like when you're taking a shower, what things you can do to help yourselves to make it easier for you, because it's such a tough thing to do. We learned so much from so many different people. And now that I'm a mentor, I have met so many great people and talked to them on the phone, met them in person, and have become friends with so many different people. And I've been able to help them through their journeys, answering some of their questions. And some of the questions that I get, they would think that they were a stupid question. It's like there's never a stupid question. And if I can't find the answers for you, I know people that can. So that has been the biggest part of our support group journey and transplant journey. We've also become volunteers with Gift of Life of Michigan, and I'm able to share my donor story with high school students throughout Southwest Michigan and other parts of the state. It's just been such an adventure since we've done all this. We're just so thankful for the opportunity, so thankful for my donor, Andrew, and just so thankful for this whole community.
My name is Jan, the wife, but also the former caregiver. One thing I learned really quickly when we came to support group was the patient desperately needs the caregiver, but the caregiver is thrown into a very difficult situation. Many of the caregivers that came to support group were either grandchildren, children, spouses, friends, neighbors. We had a big learning curve because this person who used to be part of our lives in a certain way has now changed and they've become a seriously ill patient. And we have to juggle our prior relationship, them in my case, my being a spouse, also to being a full time caregiver, helping them with their daily needs. We had no training in that, how to bathe a person, how to clothe them, how to feed them when they can't do it themselves anymore. It's a very hard journey. What I learned in the lung transplant support group was that the caregivers have so much compassion and patience for the person that they're working with, and they're willing to set aside time for the other caregivers. There were times in support group where we would actually break out, and the people who were the patient would have their own time, and the caregivers would have our own time to discuss our issues because sometimes the patient can become difficult, can become lazy, can be obstinate and stubborn. And with much love and patience and care, you need to find a way to get them to do what they need to do and keep them healthy enough to wait for their transplant. And so that was so very helpful because no one else, not your family, not your friends, not the doctors, not anyone could tell you what it's like to be a 24/7 caregiver. That is something that was so extremely helpful to me. We were also able to become peer mentors after Roy's transplant, visiting people in the hospital, talking to them on the telephone, responding to emails was very helpful. I've had calls from other wives whose husbands have been listed. How do you work on this personal issue with them? Or how do you do that? Until you find yourself in that situation, you don't know how to handle it. And being able to share that with others has been a great way to give back for all of the help that we have been given on our journey. Another thing that sometimes the patients don't want to talk about is when your lungs are failing and you're on oxygen, it is very scary. You don't know if you're going to get a next breath. and bending over to put your socks on takes your breath away. So, how do you ask for help to do that? Getting into a car with your oxygen tank all by yourself and then having it become disconnected and you go into a full blown panic. What do you do? So, the panic attacks become very frequent. And a lot of times people don't want to talk about these things because you seem like, well, maybe I'm the only one or no one else is going through this. But in support group, we would talk about these things and be open with other people. And you could see people's eyes starting to open and say, oh, that happens to you too. How did you deal with it? And then you can say, well, talk to the social worker. For us, they recommended this or that, or we ended up seeing a psychiatrist and then we had some medication that would help. And they're like, well, I didn't think we could do that. Well, everyone's situation is different, but you need to ask and you need to advocate. And so there are a lot of deeply personal things, intimacy issues, all different kinds of things that happen that you think it's only just in your situation, but really a lot of people struggle with those same issues. And so they're beyond what your doctor is going to talk about with you in your consults. But these are everyday struggles that a person being on oxygen has. And until you find yourself in that situation, you wouldn't even think to ask the question or think that it was an issue until it becomes an issue. And then it keeps you up at night. And speaking of keeping up at night, yes, I was one of those wives who would not sleep at night. I would roll over in bed to make sure his oxygen was still on, that he was still breathing. Um, when you get really, really, really sick and the doctor says, you need to think about your final plans, call your kids, prepare, the end is near, and you're like, I haven't gotten the transplant yet. What are we going to do? When that moment hits, you need all the support you can get. And the people in support group were there for us. I know they lifted us up in prayer. They encouraged us. They gave us hope. They said, you can do this one more day, one more week. You know, you don't have to worry about this. God's got this in his hands. All you have to do is take the next step. There was a time where we thought Roy wasn't going to get the transplant. Right before he got the call, we had an appointment at the University of Michigan for the dreaded hall walk. We all know what that is. You have to walk down this long hall, and for them, it's excruciating. They have to turn the oxygen all the way up, and it's just like running a marathon for them, and they dread it. And he said to me, he said, I'm not going to make it. If I can't make those 400 feet, they're not going to give me that transplant. You have to be physically able to walk a certain distance. You have to keep up with your physical conditioning because otherwise they'll say you're not going to make it through the surgery. And he was so certain he wasn't going to make it. And then
We got the call, and we're here today.
the very next day we got the call. And it was like that timing was planned. It was very much planned. How many days did you spend in the hospital?
I only spent 14 days, and the nurses, the doctors, the nursing staff here was just amazing. The people here, if you had a question or if you had any needs, they were there to help, and it was just it was a great journey. I know others have been in the hospital longer periods of time. They've had more complications, but they've all said that they wouldn't trade it for the world. We had a friend that had his transplant. He had some complications. He was in the hospital for 16 weeks. Finally, things got straightened out. And he was able to get back out into the world, back out to being able to do things like playing golf. And unfortunately, he had a heart attack and didn't make it past that. And we think about him every day. We actually met him through support group, and him and I had the same disease, and he had quite a few questions about transplants and what we were able to do afterwards. And I was kind of an inspiration to him because I started bowling as soon as the doctor said it was okay. I started golfing as soon as I could, and I was even fortunate enough to shoot a 300 game after my transplant. So yeah, it's just changed our lives. The pulmonary rehab group that we had back home and in most other hospitals and
Transplant
centers, those people are fantastic. They work hard every day to keep people alive long enough and strong enough to be able to survive their transplant. Like Janet said, before my transplant, I would go to support, or I'd go to pulmonary rehab. They would actually come down and get me in a wheelchair, bring me back up, get me to my machine, make sure my oxygen levels were set, and then Some days I wouldn't be able to get on the bike or work out for more than 5 minutes without having to take a 10 to 15-minute break to work another 5 minutes at the lowest setting. But they were always there to encourage me and to let me know that I could do it. And it was so helpful. Those people they're lifesavers.
Okay.
I think that's about it.